Beyond 3D.
Power of the dark side.
Welcome to this week's edition of Beyond 3D. Matt Adams with you here, and my co-host Clint Hamill along for the ride. Clint, how you going this week?
I'm great, thank you, Matt.
Oh, very good.
And yourself?
Good. I finally can say that I have seen Star Wars. After how many?
How many conversations have we had about you needing to actually get down there and have a look?
Literally, I finally have seen it, and I can basically say I know it's the first one in this new iteration, but the Empire needs to unweenie itself because, quite frankly, they were weak, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, but I have to agree with you, Matt, but you have to stop and think J.J. Abrams is no dummy. So there has to be a reason why
You make them seem so weenie-like?
Why Kylo Ren was such a wet mop.
Wet mop is an understatement. It's an insult to wet mops out there. He was terrible.
Look, he did have a lot of anger issues.
Yes.
It's kind
Tantrums.
of... Yeah, he was very much like a teenager that couldn't get his own way, wasn't he?
Unbelievable.
But
Unbelievable. But in general, I'll just do it this way because I'm not going to spend too much time with this. I enjoyed it.
Good.
I thought they did a pretty good job. It didn't suffer, in my opinion, the way Star Trek suffered through J.J. Abrams.
You do understand there are people that will be listening who haven't seen it yet, but I don't care.
Oh, I'm over it. If you haven't seen it by now, tough.
See, Matt, you were the last person on the
I was the last person not to see this daggone thing. So there are a few people out there, so I'm not going to give anything major away. I can say that, as far as I'm concerned, the Empire came out like a bunch of wimps. They need to toughen up a bit. I'd say the Rebels, in this instance, were fantastic. Loved the way they did it. Loved the way they did the story. Han Solo and Chewie were fantastic. I thoroughly enjoyed watching them. I even liked Luke Skywalker at the end because they left you wanting more.
I tell you what was really cool, that's going to seem really weird to some people.
Yeah.
I enjoyed watching Chewbacca's fingers.
That is weird. So
I knew you'd say that. But if you think about it, through all the times that Chewie's popped up through Star Wars, you didn't actually see his hands too much. That was just a big mop of fur.
Yeah.
And you suspended your disbelief and you realised, yes, it's a man in a fur costume and all that.
Right.
But this time they went to that little bit of extra effort and there were lots of tight camera shots of Chewie's hands holding detonators and you saw his fingers and his fingernails, and that attention to detail I really enjoyed.
now that you've said that, I'm going to have to go back and see the movie again so I can actually look at the fact that they went through all of this. Because when you said detonators, I can say, okay, I can remember the scenes, but I can't remember his hands.
See, it's amazing. Your mind and your eye are only trained for specific things. If you can break that hold.
Gotcha. Well, put it this way. I'll have to go see it again. I would enjoy to see it again. It would be fun to see again anyway, but I thought it was a very good movie, and very glad I went to see it. And hey, on to the next one, because they need to really unwimp
Kylo Ren. Or should we say, or can we call him Ben Solo?
Yeah, you can call him that. I don't mind you calling him that. Their son was a wimp. It's basically all
He had serious daddy issues, didn't he? Serious daddy issues. But,
Unbelievable.
I'm sure we'll see where that goes later. Beyond 3D. Now, Matt, what else have you been looking at this week?
Oh, it's been a busy week, but I heard, and every time I think of this, I go back to my cartoon days. Scientists from CalTech have discovered...
CalTech being California University of Technology?
In Pasadena, California. For those of you who don't know what that is and where that is, just think Big Bang Theory. It's where they teach on the TV show. They have discovered a 9th planet.
Now, when you say they have discovered, they really haven't discovered anything. All they've done is made a statement to the world with the backing of CalTech on this discovery that they're putting forward is the 9th planet, which, if you go back through the ancient history, all the way back to ancient Mesopotamia, they already knew about this planet.
If you go even further back than that, in my opinion at least, to the Upanishads and the Vedas, they have always talked about there being 12 planets in the solar system. They deplanetized Pluto, so to speak, and made it a dwarf planet or something like that, and that was the 9th planet for a while. But now what they're saying is there is a Neptune-sized planet out in the Kuiper Belt somewhere. And Clint, I'll leave you to basically give the audience what we basically think that is.
Okay, so how far back did you say?
The Vedas and the Upanishads, so we're going back a few millennia.
A few millennia. Okay, well, this particular planet's had many, many different names over the millennia. Some people call it the Destroyer. Other civilizations have called it Nabiru, Wormwood, the Comet Typhon, and mainstream science today calls it Planet X. Now, the thing about Planet X is, yes, okay, we have the basic planets that we have in the solar system that when we were going through school, we were told, here's your Mercury, here's your Venus, Saturn, Jupiter, Neptune, Pluto. And I know I did not say those in correct order. But
we're not going to go there, are we?
But Nabiru.
Yeah, we might as well.
Nibiru has a different elliptical orbit in the solar system to what our other planets do. So if you think about the planets that we have in our solar system, how they rotate around the sun at different times in a different path. Well, not so much in a different path, but they all have the same, they all move in the same way, but they don't collide. They're all passing each other. Nibiru has a totally different elliptical orbit. So if you think of like a planet like Saturn moving around the sun, you just contemplate that in moving in the orbit of a circle around the sun. When you're talking about Nibiru, its elliptical orbit around the sun is like an oval, but that's been stretched right out from left to right. And what happens is it cuts through our solar system every 3,600 years. And it pulls all gravity with it as well. They expect weather patterns this year, 2016, to be the most extreme weather patterns you've ever seen. Because of the fact that this planet is passing through our solar system. Now, CalTech has come forward and said, yep, we've discovered this, what did you say, 9th planet?
9th planet, yeah.
Yeah, okay, so we've discovered this 9th planet, everybody, and here's the media release on that. But if you dig through history, if you go through, I remember about 2 years ago here at the Melbourne Museum, they had ancient Mesopotamia display exhibition that they were hosting, where they had artifacts showing Nibiru, the 9th planet, and it passing through Mesopotamia. And we're talking about civilizations, Matt, that didn't even have telescopes.
Yeah, we are actually.
So
that we know of.
So for them to be able to document this planet coming through, and it's all through history, this 9th planet. Google Nibiru, Google Planet X, go onto YouTube, have a look online through the interweb. You'll find so much information on it. Absolutely,
and if you don't feel like doing that, just go back to Warner Brothers and check out Duck Dodgers in the 24th and a half century. Because he actually went and stood on Planet X. Daffy Duck did.
I know he did. I know. I was just sitting here contemplating that episode in my head.
Can you do it, Dodgers?
Anyway, so that's what's been happening in regards to Planet X Nibiru.
Yeah, the two...
You can actually see it.
Professors at CalTech. It's I'm trying to look them up here. Mike Brown and Konstantin Batygin.
They're the guys that deleted Pluto, didn't they?
One of them, Mike Brown, I believe, he wrote a book about the killing of Pluto, and in an article from sciencemag.org, it actually, he says, killing Pluto was fun, but this is head and shoulders above everything else.
The thing is, amateur astronomers have been watching Nabiru turn up for probably, I'd say, the last 5, 6, maybe 10 years. They've been watching it.
They have.
And not so much watching it, but also getting data coming back and using that data to go, okay, hang on a second, something's out there. What's causing these waves through space?
But what happens with an amateur astronomer is the fact that when you are dealing with the so-called professionals, they do not take them seriously in a lot of instances. And so you can have a Celestron 8 telescope set up. You can be looking up into the heavens and you can spot many different things going on. You can zoom in on a star and you can see a warble around that star and decide, but obviously for that to happen, there might be a planet encircling that. They have to verify it for you. It's the same thing in a lot of different instances. You can say the same thing happens with the law. You can take you can write a contract up yourself. And that contract can be absolutely valid, but you then have to go to a lawyer in contract law and have them verify that it is valid. So, in a sense, I believe the amateur astronomy community really does a service to us, because a lot of the information that is out there, we'll get it from them beforehand.
Oh, absolutely.
They have to do so much work on the university level before they can put any information out, because they do not want to put themselves in a situation where they can be shunned in their own communities.
Not just say, we're talking about people that are professional educators who are on tenure with universities.
Yeah, absolutely.
So they're not going to risk their tenures. They're not going to risk the income or bite the hand that feeds them. So it's very... it's like a minefield for them to put forward this information and to leak it to public as well, without breaking protocol.
Yeah. Yeah, and looking at, if you look at sciencemag.org, they're talking about Planet X and pointing to it. And Clint, you're totally right insofar as the orbit of this ninth planet and how it comes in, almost on a 90-degree angle into the solar system.
3,600 years.
That's a long arc.
So it takes the Earth 365 days to do one elliptical orbit of the sun. So Planet X takes 3,600 years.
That's a lot.
It's a lot.
And so therefore, as Clint also was saying, when this planet does come in to the solar system and starts approaching, the waves before it and the waves behind it are going to have a dramatic effect on everything that's going on.
Yes, the waves in front. Yes, but I'd say more so the waves behind, because this planet in its orbit is not just moving through space, but it's pulling behind it, dragging along
A lot of...
an entire cosmos full of garbage, rubbish, broken planets, asteroids, minerals, you name it, Matt. Anything that's getting sucked along its momentum and getting caught in its tail drag, that's dragging it all along for the ride, and all that's going to be dumped into our solar system.
And looking at this photo, it looks like it'll come in on an angle right around Saturn.
And the other thing is...
Nice.
It's not going to look pretty.
No.
And I'd hate to think... They talk about things like natural disasters. The kind of natural disaster that this could cause, it could cause, is the reason why mainstream media doesn't have it on the top story on the 6 o'clock news. Because the panic that would lead up to something like that. Beyond 3.
But the fact of the matter is, what can you do about it? Have you ever been in an earthquake?
Yes.
Okay, you're standing there. You can look horizon to horizon. What can you do?
Well, hang on a second, mate. You didn't ask me where I was.
Okay, where were you?
In bed.
Okay.
I actually thought it was me.
Oh, great. Very funny. Very funny.
No, I'm serious. We do get here in Melbourne earthquakes occasionally. Very, very rare. Usually they come. The shockwaves of an earthquake come into Melbourne from out of Gippsland Way, which is a good 2 hours away from Melbourne. So we'll get the aftershocks here, and it's usually very, very mild. You'll have an aftershock, and you look at each other and go, was that an earthquake? Was that something? What you're talking about is entire giant buildings falling down.
No, my wife and I, we were in Las Vegas, and we were on a 21st floor of the hotel, and a 7.0 earthquake came through.
Okay.
You look out the window, you look around you, everything is shaking, you are in the middle of it. What are you going to do? There's nothing you can do. You can't run. You can't get on a plane. Too bad. There's nothing you can do. So for the mainstream media and for governments to say, oh, well, we don't want to panic people. Yeah, that might be the case. But if this thing is coming in, there's not much you're going to be able to do about it.
There is not much at all.
And if you want to talk science fiction and about, they can send up the rockets and Bruce Willis and all this kind of stuff, bull.
That's
not going to happen.
I like Armageddon. Do you know how much I like Armageddon, that film? I'll tell you how much I like that film. I saw it once. And I did not want to see it again because I didn't want to ruin that experience. But that is a great look. Who knows whether that's science fact or science fiction?
Yeah, but the fact of the matter is, if you think about it, they have been finding so many different planets. Basically, they say if you look up in the sky and there is a star there are planets circling it.
I was trying to explain this to my children, to my daughters last year. A lot of people don't actually get this. When you look up at the night sky and you see a star, that is not necessarily an individual planet or an individual star, it's quite highly possible, and I've been told by people that are amateur astronomers, when you're looking at a star in the sky, what you're also could be looking at, is a cluster of a galaxy shining as one star.
Okay.
So when you're looking up at all these different stars, they're also thousands and thousands of galaxies which have their own stars in them, shining so far away that it's shining as one little dot.
Yep. Absolutely. I used to love astronomy as a kid. I have my telescopes in the garage now, but I still have a telescope, and I used to do a lot of sky watching. And quite frankly, you're right. It's a very valid point. It's very pertinent. You look up there, and if you just look at it this way, every time you look up and you see a star shining up there, there are planets circling it, period. Do not think that it's any other way. Don't allow science or anybody else in government to tell you that, it's not that way. There are plenty of Earth-like planets out there. This planet, Planet X, they are basically saying they've discovered it, but there's a reason for them saying this, and I think that's what we're going to really have to delve into. Why all of a sudden are they admitting to this?
I don't know. I can look. If I looked at the narrative, what's the narrative behind this? The narrative behind not telling people about it could possibly be because, from an economic point of view, if everybody knew that Wormwood or Planet X or Nabiru was going to turn up and cause absolute chaos to all societies all around the world next year, I wouldn't be going to work tomorrow. I'd be taking a one-way ticket to Thailand or Bali and spending my last remaining days on a beach.
Yeah, I don't blame you.
And everybody else would too.
Yeah, and we used to say that back in the States, because in my book I talked about this. If there were a nuclear holocaust coming, most people said the markets would panic, everything would go down and everything like that. And we always used to say, well, if that's the case, we'll buy it all. Because if we survive it, we're going to be rich, because everything's going to go the other way. It'll ultimately stabilize and go back up the other way.
I have a wonderful saying that's what you lose on the swings, you gain on the roundabouts.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's one of the things we've been looking at this week, and it's interesting because now what that will lead to is a lot of speculation in the scientific community. I'm starting to hear things about the Russians cutting back on their space program and not doing as much as far as going to the International Space Station.
Well, that's the thing too about NASA. I mean, I know I bag NASA out a lot, but at the end of the day,
rightly so.
And rightly so, but at the end of the day, NASA is a part of the US military. It has to be a part of the US military. When you have captains and majors who are taking up these spacecraft, like shuttles and that, they are US military personnel. So NASA is a branch of the US, whether it be the military, the Navy, or the Air Force. I do know that space comes under the category of Navy.
Yeah, it does.
So if you're a commander or a captain or a major and you fly a NASA shuttle, you technically come under the umbrella of the US Navy. Now, NASA is sitting on so much information that they drip feed the public. When NASA choose to come forward, and they will choose to come forward soon in regards to Planet X or Nabiru, and they will mention it, it's highly likely, Matt, that there's probably about 90% of what they're not telling us, and they're only giving us that 10%.
It's the way it goes. Now, with NASA, in general terms, they are contracted by the military. There are a lot of companies out there that are that way. A very good friend of mine is a pilot who I said we were going to have on the show soon, and we are, he works for a company, and that company is also hired by the military as far as moving cargo around the planet. So NASA, in the same sense, does the same thing. When the shuttles were flying, there was a military part of the payload, but they classified it, and we would never find out what the military was actually bringing up there with them. We heard about a few science experiments and things like that. That was it. Outside of that, most of the military payloads were classified, therefore need-to-know basis, and we were not on their list of people that needed to know. And so therefore we had to deal with that. But, quite frankly, there's going to come a point in time where information overload or saturation point will be hit, and NASA and a few other institutions will have to start revealing certain things. And don't expect it, and we've always said this before, it will not come from the White House, it will not come from Canberra, it will not come from any major government executive branch. It will just be.
It'll come out through people, through people like you and I, through people like amateur astronomers.
It'll come out like this. It'll come out where CalTech scientists will all of a sudden say there is a ninth planet, Planet X, and they say it in their way, and it's not Nabiru or anything along those lines, which people tend to put into the
category, pigeonhole
it into that science fiction or category, lack of a better term. So that's the way the information will come out. The so-called academia will accept the fact that this thing is out there, and they will start working around that.
And it's an interesting time to be alive at the moment too, because there's so many different kinds of disclosure happening. Whether it be disclosure for life on other planets, whether it be disclosure for the secret space program, whether it's disclosure for the ninth planet that all of a sudden we're going to tell you about that exists, which history has known.
Yep, absolutely. All of that kind of thing is coming out. I mean, I've seen this past week, I have seen a few more pyramids on Mars, things along those lines. And when you look at the photos, they're not naturally occurring phenomenon. It was, in my opinion, carved. It was built. Yep. So all of that stuff is coming out as well. Because what's starting to happen is, and this is just the way it goes, as more people have experiences, they have to digest that experience, put it through all of their filters, and it's going to come out on the other side, and they're going to just say, well, this is what happened to me. I'm going to either keep it quiet, that way I can continue on my scientific way, or I'm going to just admit that this stuff does happen, and I'm going to have to investigate it. And a lot of the guys now are starting to investigate it.
I tell you who has been investigating it, and I have got a few of his news feeds have popped up lately, is Dr. Richard Allen Miller, and he has published quite an extensive amount of information lately in regards to Nabiru and altering weather patterns that are happening at the moment because of it. So if anybody wants to Google him and check out what it is he's talking about, it's really, really interesting. Beyond 333D. But I tell you, Matt, another gentleman who I've been exploring and looking at this week is Dr. Stephen Greer.
Ah, yes. Disclosure Project.
The Disclosure Project. Now, if anyone doesn't know anything about Dr. Stephen Greer, I'll give you a really super quick version, and I'm not going to do him justice. He was a trauma surgeon.
Yeah.
So he worked in the emergency room dealing with trauma patients that came in. So we're talking about car accidents, just anything you could possibly horrifically think about.
Shootings, stabbings, name it.
Absolutely. It was his job to put you back together. He also at the same time practiced transcendental meditation and other forms of meditation, and went on a bit of a spiritual journey, and now he is the go-to guy, and he lectures all around the world in regards to the Disclosure Project. Now the Disclosure Project is his little way of trying to strong-arm governments around the world to give up their UFO secrets.
Yep.
The only reason he hasn't been bumped off yet is because the minute they do that, it confirms everything that he's been talking about over the years in regards to disclosure.
Yeah, and I've heard him actually say that he doesn't believe, maybe it's the humility of the man, he doesn't believe he's big enough as far as they would have to take him out or something like that. The way he put it at the time was, if he were the president of the United States saying something like this, it would be a different situation. He's a surgeon that is doing research, and so therefore he's not quite on their radar. But, as you have just said, I'll let you get into it, because believe me, he is the go-to guy for just about every government.
Well, that's the thing. He is the middleman that the director of the CIA, James Woolsey, goes to. So if the head guy of the CIA comes to Dr. Stephen Greer for information about what's coming, who they are, where they're from, how do you contact them. A lot of people don't know Dr. Stephen Greer actually has many expeditions where he'll go out into Joshua Tree in the desert, and he'll call these UFOs down using nothing more than transcendental meditation and laser pointers. And he'll signal them with laser pointers, and he'll get them to fly in, and he's got it all on camera. He's caught it all on camera, Matt. It is the most amazing stuff. And not just that, he has whistleblowers all around the world high military personnel that give him the documents that are ready to be subpoenaed to go to in front of a national inquiry in regards to the UFO secret.
Absolutely.
So I do have a little clip here in regards to the Disclosure Project. It was filmed in London just recently. It goes for 2 hours, Matt, and I'm not going to play 2 hours of it. I'll just give our listeners tonight a very, very condensed version. So this is Dr. Stephen Greer on September the 17th in London, talking about the ET Contact Disclosure Project. Beyond, 3, D.
It's a pleasure to be in London again. Last time I was here was the premiere for BAFTA at the Sirius premiere. It was just over here in Piccadilly, I think. This is also a live webinar. It's going worldwide. So but I really want to thank everyone for supporting this tonight and coming out. We didn't know how many people would want to come out in the middle of the week like this, but I was in Europe doing a CE5 training expedition in Portugal, which I'm just fresh off the farm in Portugal. We were on a farm actually, and it was beautiful, and I'll maybe have time to share some of what happened during that expedition. And we did a similar presentation to this, but not live webinar in Lisbon, with wonderful people there, and some people who were in the military there came and shared their stories of some encounters with us with these ET spacecraft. So, it's a wonderful opportunity here in London, by the way, for you guys to organize around contact groups in CE5, the Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind Initiative, and also disclosure efforts. Because the two powerhouses on the secrecy of this whole subject are, in descending order, number 1, United States, number 2, Great Britain, number 3, everyone else. And you're seeing a document up here I'm going to talk about in some length of what has happened over the last 7 or 8 years with the French Ministry of Defense. And the irony of being the head of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence and the founder of the Global Disclosure Movement is that since that date, I've been sitting on the most important government document in the history of the UFO subject, but didn't feel I could share it because I didn't want to burn bridges to the Sarkozy regime and the Ministry of Defense officials working with the French government at that time. I feel at this point enough water has passed under the bridge that I can share it, so that's why I'm sharing it here in London and worldwide, and soon it will be up on our website. The key thing to understand is that there's two things going on with the projects that we founded 25 years ago this month. In fact, it's the 25th anniversary of the Center for the Study of Extraterrestrial Intelligence. And it started as an effort to organize people, a citizens diplomacy effort, to end the hegemony of covert programs on the issue and let the average person make contact and be the face of humanity instead of a bunch of petro-Nazis and militarists and warmongers and misanthropic money whores. Other than that, I have no opinion about the subject. And but the whole impetus was the concept of transdimensional physics and the interface between consciousness and non-locality in physics, what Einstein called the spooky theory. All right, we'll get into this a little bit later. And so, by 1991, 92, we had gone to Belgium and had some amazing close encounters of the fifth kind, which is when humans initiate contact and these interstellar vehicles and people show up. And then we went down to Florida and had a group of about 50, 60 people just for a weekend. And as you've all seen in the film Sirius, there were these 4 ET craft that just materialized in the sky. That's the videotape when the guy with the very deep southern accent is going, "Holy damn hot shit!" I questioned whether I should edit that out of the documentary Sirius, but I just said, no, that's cool, it's authentic, it's cinema verite, so let's leave it in. And so from then on, what happened is that the intelligence community took note of what we were doing. The Disclosure Project was an outgrowth of Project Starlight, which, as many of you may know, was the initiative that I started, that then Lawrence Rockefeller played a support role in, not a primary role in, to brief the Clinton administration, etc. In December of 1993, independent from anything Lawrence Rockefeller wanted to do, I was asked to brief the sitting director of the CIA in the United States. My wife, who is here, Emily, thank you. Emily, by the way, we definitely wouldn't be here without my wife, Emily. Thank you, Emily. Yeah, we just had our 36th anniversary. Yeah, I know. Cool. But the people, who started this project with me, we never thought it would be of that much interest to the government because it was really a citizens' effort. But by the time President Clinton got elected and was in office, the folks who were his senior national security advisors in Inner Circle had been contacted by people following my work and said, this is really happening. And they knew in the intelligence community that we had figured out the Rosetta Stone of contact, meaning non-locality and consciousness, coherent thought, like laser is a coherent light. We're going to talk about this. And trans-dimensional physics, how interstellar systems interface with coherent thought. Recently, Mark Zuckerberg of Facebook said his next thing he wants to work on is how to actuate the technologies with thought. So a lot of people are picking up on this concept 25 years later. But if you're dealing with interstellar civilizations, they figured this all out a few thousand years ago, a few million years ago, maybe 10 million years ago. And the universe is 14 billion years old, so who knows how long ago some of these civilizations have figured out these technologies. All I can say is they work. And they work because, as I shared with the CIA director's wife at dinner, you can't get there from here, as we say in Maine. You cannot communicate using the speed of light across interstellar distances. You have to drop out of 3D, 4D, go into trans-dimensional physics, and if you go into these other dimensions, you are interfacing with the realm of thought, consciousness, thought forms, etc., and so on very quickly. So all of these civilizations have figured that out, and in a way it was a shocking concept 25 years ago, except if you looked at the research, there were a lot of people who were doing things with DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Administration, Stanford Research International, doing remote viewing, people like Ingo Swann, who is a friend of mine, some of you may have heard the name, David Morehouse, others. And what they found was that, in fact, those systems work, and Dr. Bob John, J-A-H-N at Princeton, a professor of engineering, found that actually if you put your awareness on a random number generation, you can shift whether putting out zeros or ones. And that if two people who love each other or are united do it, it's an exponential increase. And this has been reproducible over and over and over again in many scientific models, even though it flies in the face of the conventional reductionist linear 3-4D model. So in the upper echelons, or I should say deeper echelons, of the intelligence community and military and also academia, this is really well understood. It's only the mainstream media and sort of the mediocre academics and mediocre government people who don't understand this. But the exceptional and folks do. So when we started experimenting with this, and boom, it immediately got on the radar scope of the intelligence community, much to my chagrin. And we were approached by some folks who first threatened me, and I told them on their nose uncertain terms, I cannot be threatened or bought off or intimidated. I basically said, go away. But they persisted, and what we have found is that whatever we have tried to do for disclosure and contact, there's a countermeasure that gets created by the intelligence community. And this is true at the level of presidential intelligence and even folks who direct your government and MI5, MI6, your Ministry of Defense head. And as you all know, Lord Hill Norton, everybody familiar with Lord Hill Norton? He'd been your MOD head years ago. And when I was at his cottage here in Hampshire, he says, the whole time that I was head of the Ministry of Defense, and of course MI5 and MI6 by extension, you don't have a separate CIA director type person, I was never told anything about this. I only found out about this after the fact. And he was very upset about it. And most people would assume someone at that level of your intelligence community or your Ministry of Defense, major G7 country, group of 7 country, top economy in the world, would be knowledgeable and would be pulled into the briefings on this subject. But they are not. And the same is true in the United States, for the most part. Now, people say, well, why is it that some CIA directors have known and others haven't? And some MOD folks have known and others haven't. And I always point out, it has nothing to do with your rank, nothing to do with your position, nothing to do whether you're a doctor, a PhD, an MD, and in this case also an admiral in the Ministry of Defense. It's all based on whether you are going to go along with the agenda. No, not the alien agenda. The agenda of secrecy. Because this subject, as you all know, once disclosed properly and in a hopeful and productive way, would leave no aspect of life on this planet unchanged. Up to and including the complete rearrangement of our macroeconomic system, our energy system, political system, social system, and ultimately major religious systems and thought. That, of course, is enough to keep the brakes on anything. Because as a very interesting guy at the Jet Propulsion Labs once told me, he said, he was talking about these obelisks and other objects on the moon, on Mars, and some of the other structures out there, which do exist, by the way. And Buzz Aldrin even recently called for going back to Mars to investigate them, right? You may not know that, he did. And, but this guy at JPL said, we can't disclose that to the public. I said, why not? It's old stuff. These are old structures, millions of years old. This is not something a few thousand years old. He said, because it would show the ancient connection between other civilizations and the development of intelligent life on Earth, and that would collapse the foundations of every fundamentalist orthodox belief system of every religion on Earth. And I said, well, good. He says, no, you don't understand. There's a lot of power there. This big of a change they do not want to see happen. All right. I think it's important to understand that there is a secret space program. By the time we landed on the moon with my uncle's lunar module, they already had 15 years earlier anti-gravs that were flying around. Now, that is true. But then what happens is there are people who say, oh yeah, and I've been to this star system and back, and those are great claims, prove it. So I need to either have multiple independent corroborating individuals and documents and et cetera for me to buy that. My understanding is that there are, in fact, a secret space force, but it doesn't go too far out there because the interstellar civilizations don't want it. In fact, I had a meeting not long ago, a couple years ago, with this senior Naval Research Lab scientist who had come out of a briefing with a general at the Defense Intelligence Agency that had just been shown images of a massive interstellar craft out around near the rings of Saturn. And it was interesting, he didn't know that one of the executives at Lockheed Martin that was running the Cassini probe had called me to give me the same information. And apparently this space center is in the order of dozens to hundreds of miles in diameter. My military advisor for many years was at NORAD, North American Air Defense Command, and was in a Console 50, is what it was called back then, that tracked the interstellars and interplanetaries. And he said that at that time, back in the 70s, that they had tracked an object out in deep space that, in our solar system though, that was 26 miles in diameter. I mean, that's like the whole diameter across the city of London. floating out there. And he said, his Navy guy said, floating under its own steam, moving under its own steam. I said, I don't think they're using steam, but Navy guy, he's thinking steam.
Beyond 3 D.
But, so yes, that part, so there are interstellar objects out there, and there are man-made electromagnetic gravitics that can go a certain point, but my understanding is that we're not allowed to just go way out there. And the reason for it is that we're not considered civilized yet. If you doubt it, come to an emergency department with me in America on any Saturday night, or whatever. I mean, it's not hard to figure out that until humans begin to live at a level 1 civilization that Michikaku calls a level 1, we're simply not going to be allowed to go very far out there. So I'm skeptical of some of the claims. So yes, we have a secret Air Force and a secret Space Force. So we basically have a civilization that its entire system is running on a 70 to a 120-year-old paradigm of energy and a macroeconomic system that goes with it. So if you change that, you have to be prepared for the biggest change in the history of the human race. I estimate that everything that is from the Industrial Revolution in the early 1800s to now would be eclipsed by an order of magnitude 10-fold greater within 20 years of the disclosure of this information and the technologies that are attendant to it that pull energy out of the zero-point energy field and allow for the Z-plane of travel, levitation, boom. So there it is. Peter Thiel, one of the co-founders of the PayPal with Elon Musk, who now has, as you know, the Tesla Motors, said recently in an interview on CNN, basically there have been no technological developments in 50, 60 years of any consequence. It still takes you the same amount of time to go from JFK to Heathrow now as it did in 1964 on a Boeing 707 instead of an Airbus 380. Same thing. And so when you look at that, this is always a shocker to people who say, I'm working the high-tech industry. I said, we don't have any high-tech industry on planet Earth. And as Michikaku points out, we're not even a level 1 civilization. We're a level 0. Level 1 is you're living peacefully and not cannibalizing your biosphere and has sustainable energy systems that don't damage the environment. That's level 1. So we're level 0. Now our group is going out, initiating contact with civilizations that are at level 300. Get it? Okay, so it's so there is a bit of a gap. We have some splaining to do, but actually that gap can be closed very quickly once people stop lying about this issue. And this is why the intelligence community became so interested. And it wasn't because of the concept of disclosure per se, it was the vision of interplanetary contact, interstellar contact. And that's why the French Ministry of Defense contacted us. Just the same reason that the intelligence community in the United States did so. They were extremely interested in how is contact made, and they vowed to embark on a long-term journey to do just that, for peaceful purposes. This is why we'll go through this in a moment, it's the most important document ever written from a government entity. And the attachment is even more astonishing, which is an attachment of all the protocols to be used as contact is made and how it's evaluated, with the full resources of the Ministry of Defense of France. Why is that important? Because it's a baby step of a major country doing something that should have happened in the 1940s, 50s, 60s, had there not been a complete subversion by covert military interests, which Eisenhower, the President of the United States, and a 5-star general warned us about. And also Lord Hill Norton, a 5-star admiral, a Sea Lord, said that he came to realize that our entire civilization is really at risk, not from the UFOs or the ETs, but from the secrecy. The first director of the CIA, Admiral Roscoe Hillenkoetter, the first CIA director, I have a letter that's up on our website, SiriusDisclosure.com, SIRIUS Disclosure.com. That is from him, where he states that the secrecy attending this issue is a grave threat, because the folks who have created the secrecy do not have the best interests of the United States or the United Kingdom or of humanity in interest. They have the most venal interest at heart, and that is global control and domination through a centralized macroeconomic system where pretty much most folks don't realize this. You know, we think we abolished slavery in the mid-1800s. We didn't. It's just the American plantation is a little nicer than the one in the Congo. But there is a masters and slaves mentality amongst the uber elites that control hundreds of trillions of dollars worth of assets that require a centralized petrodollar system and a centralized energy system, which has been an obsolete paradigm for well on 100 years now. So this information coming out isn't just about are we alone in the universe or not. Most conventional astrophysicists agree that we're not. Now, where they disagree is that they would have the ability to get to Earth, because being the egomaniacs most academics are, and scientists in general, with all due respect to any scientists here, every generation thinks that they know everything. So they can't imagine there'd be a civilization so far advanced beyond us that they could get from 4 or 5 million light years away to here. But that's exactly, I'm going to show you a picture later of an interstellar ambassador who did just that from the Andromeda Galaxy. And so I'm going to show you the most important document and also the most important picture in the history of the UFO subject and how that happened tonight. Now, all of that brings up this question of, if the governments of the world don't do this, then the people should. And that's what I concluded in the 1990s, that the people will lead, the leaders will have to follow eventually. But it isn't going to be through passivity. You're going to have to organize your own contact teams, which Mark here in England has done and gone out. You're going to have to organize your own disclosure witnesses who are deep whistleblowers in your Ministry of Defense and MI5 and MI6. And you're going to have to encourage the government to try to begin to catch up with what the French are doing, and which a government I cannot discuss because it's a negotiation and process is about to launch on, but it's one of the most important countries in the world, not American or UK or French. You can go guess. There are a few. So, and also they're wanting to push hard on bringing out the technologies. Now, we hope the Prime Minister doesn't get assassinated trying. But, you know, and believe me, the threats that I get on a weekly basis into my project is, you know, amazing. But these people in governmental positions need to take the responsibility, and you need to hold their feet to the fire if they don't. And then take matters into your own hands. By the way, isn't there a bloke named Gary McKinnon or something like that here in the UK? After the Disclosure Project events in 2001, this young lad decided he'd start digging into this subject and hacked into some computers. And he got prosecuted. They tried to extradite him to the United States. I reached out to his attorney and said, look, you're arguing this all on the wrong merits. All on the wrong merits. Anybody in here who's a whistleblower, listen, and everyone online listening, I know there are people listening in these divisions, classified, above, top secret, unacknowledged projects are listening to this. Do not buy into the legality of the national security orders and oaths related to this subject. They're all null and void. We vitiated them back in 1998. They were completely vitiated because we were able to prove that both in your country and in the United States, the president, the director of the CIA, the top people at the Pentagon and the intelligence, the J2, head of intelligence, Joint Chiefs of Staff, the head of the Defense Intelligence Agency, which is as big as the CIA, but is its own in-house thing at the Pentagon, all of whom I personally briefed, every single one of them to a man, and including your Lord Hill Norton, had been denied access to these projects. A priori, the projects are unconstitutional and they're illegal. And if they're illegal, the rule of law does not pertain to the operations attending thereto. Got it? Yeah. Therefore, anyone who wishes to step forward, documents, material, biologicals, technologies, they are free to do so without penalty of law, because the operations themselves are illegal. Now, when I got threatened in 1991, 92, 93 by some folks from the agency and the FBI doing what I was doing, I said, really? Come put on the bracelets. You want to get on the dance floor? Let's get on the dance floor right now. Excuse my French. Because I will clean your clock if this goes to trial and you try to put me in prison, because I will be able to then hit subpoenas to this CIA director I briefed, and to these generals, and to these admirals, and to your MOD head. And when they testify that we don't know anything about these projects, they're unacknowledged special access projects which are illegal, I'm going to have you point, set, match. So just stay out of my way. And they did, because I haven't been imprisoned. And I put on the street many, many top secret documents. Now, that's what Gary McKinnon's lawyer should have ordered or argued. He argued all the wrong things, completely untutored on what the constitutional theories are for the Disclosure Project. Does this make sense? Now, when we went from Project Starlight, which was the initiative, and the documents are up on our website. By the way, the AP sued, the Associated Press sued the Clinton Library to get them released. And they were released officially. Signed by myself and a bunch of cosmonauts and astronauts and former KGB people from all over the world, saying, lead this effort to end the secrecy, et cetera, and so on. When I realized that the president wouldn't act, the Congress wouldn't act, then I said, then we're going to act. That's how the Disclosure Project happened. It was the default position. The first was offered to our leaders, including your own. And by the way, there's a guy named Nick Pope, who used to be with the Ministry of Defense. When we had the Alton Barnes event, where there was an interstellar vehicle that materialized in the field and was floating towards us at the wee hours of the morning, MOD found out about it, and Colin Andrews was contacted by Nick Pope when he was working there and said, would you come to London for a meeting? I said, sure. So that I met him when he was still in that office, but he admitted he just gathered intelligence and kicked it upstairs, and it went into a black hole. He had no idea where it went. And he admitted that, and that's when he was still working there. So, and perhaps he still works for them, I don't know. But the point I'm making is it's highly, highly compartmentalized. So when the French first approached me, I'm giving you this background so there's some context of understanding why and how this happened. They first contacted us through some very prominent French diplomats, and who said to me, look, we're very interested in pursuing this for peaceful purposes, because I made it very clear I would not be involved in an operation that militarized the contact or had any weapon systems on site or involved, except to keep the bad guys away from us, including radar systems, air support, naval support, ground forces, special forces. And that's what I requested. And they said, fine, we'll do it. And what ended up happening is that they were gathering information on what was really going on the subject in the United States, and to an extent, indirectly in the UK. And they found out, of course, something that they didn't think was possible, because it sounds like a bad John le Carré novel or a conspiracy theory. And I wrote to them and then had some phone calls and said, look, what you have to understand is that in the United States, between, and this was back then, 100 and 200 billion US dollars a year go unaccounted for in the Department of Defense and intelligence community. No one even knows where it's going. As you know from the film Sirius, Donald Rumsfeld himself, no flaming liberal, he said there was $2.3 trillion unaccounted for in the Department of Defense budget. Now the estimates are around $8.5 trillion. 15, 14 years later after 9/11. Trillion. So I said the bottom line is America, the United States of America, loses and can account for more money each year than the entire Eurozone and Great Britain together's military budgets. And actually more than the budget of China, which just hit $110 billion this year, which is a rounding error in the United States. I mean, nobody notices 110 billion. Nobody notices that at all. Our budget is $5 trillion in the United States government.
Beyond.
So that's the problem. It is such a corrupt morass. And I'm a proud American. My mother's family were, I'm sorry to say this in London, some of the original founders of the United States fighting the British, but we love you now. But God bless all. But she used to go on and on about that, because in America you have these old dowagers who are daughters of the American Revolution, and they're very curmudgeons. And my dad is half Cherokee Indian, Native Americans, and he says, "What the hell, woman? My people are waiting for the Mayflower to get here." I said, "Touche." But that's, when you look at that kind of spending that is unaccounted for, and it isn't as if the president has access to those projects, or your prime minister for the component that is going on in the United Kingdom, or most ministers of defense and most CIA directors. But some do and some don't. And the ones who do, it's because they came up through the ranks and they did what I call a soul biopsy. I'm a trauma doctor, so I use medical analogies. So, if you want to take a biopsy of something to look at it, so they do an analysis of the person's values, beliefs, and ultimately it's whether they'll go along with the agenda of secrecy and criminality. Because when I presented this situation to your former Minister of Defense, Lord Hill Norton, and I'm sitting at his cottage, and he's this old guy, steely blue eyes, and I explained, he said, "Why wouldn't they have told me?" And he was hurt, and a bit peeved, actually, mad, and his pride was hurt. I mean, imagine being in that position and being kept in the dark about the biggest secret in history. And he knew by then it was all true. And I said, "Well, let me answer your question with a question. What would you have done if you found that there was an illegal, super secret, unacknowledged special access project, transnational, not international, transnational, transects geopolitical boundaries, that is sitting on the technologies that would give us a new civilization without poverty or pollution, that they have enforced the secrecy through murder, mayhem, lies, deception, and intimidation, up to and including high officials in governments, both governments, including your government." He said, "I wouldn't have stood for it for a bloody minute." And he was just like in a lather. And I said, "That's why they didn't tell you." They didn't tell you. So if you're someone who is fundamentally an honest and good person, they're not going to read you into this. That's military speak for brief you. They're not going to get read into a project like this. So when I began to explain how utterly, completely dysfunctional the American military-industrial laboratory corporate financial system is, and how deep black it actually operates, anything important almost never is brought to the attention of the President of the United States. I can say this with in real solid authority. Or your Prime Minister, Cameron Brown. Isn't that who he is? Yeah. For now. So those are placeholders. It's a little bit like the Truman Show. Everybody see the movie in the Truman Show? You have people who are, it's sort of a thing with Jim Carrey where he's living this world and it all ends up to be a set and it's all fake. I don't know. It's a great movie to look. It's a great, interesting parallel to this. And so the Truman Show is pretty much what our normal political system is, including most of the good people who are in your Ministry of Defense, intelligence community, politicians, etc. It's an extremely tightly compartmented operation. It's very well funded. The other part to understand is nothing important of any strategic significance is above the surface of the Earth. If it's above ground level, it's not really that important. It's fungible, replaceable. Everything critical is underground basis, all throughout the United States, Australia, Pine Gap, and also here in the UK. So anything that is critically important is not sitting above ground. You're not going to see it with a spy satellite, you're not going to see it from an aircraft, and access is multiple levels of entry. I've been in a couple places like this. So that's basically how it's managed. Super secret, illegally, and they tell the people they think they can manipulate. But they will tell certain people a little bit of information if they think they can manipulate them by giving them a little piece of it, usually a distorted piece. We had a president named Reagan, who put all this effort into the SDI, Star Wars initiative, which is really a cover story for putting platforms in space targeting interstellar vehicles, which is what we're doing. It really had nothing to do with brilliant pebbles. That was all just sort of a cover story. The real money was going into interstellar targeting and tracking of these ET craft and shooting them down, which we've been doing for a very long time. And they told him just enough information in a xenophobic way, in a way that was scary, to get his cooperation with that project. And that's why at the UN, if you Google it, you'll see that Reagan said, wouldn't our job of creating world unity and peace be easier if we had a common alien threat to unite against? Very familiar theme. Douglas MacArthur in 1950s, his last address to the Congress, said World War III will be interplanetary. This has been planned since I was 1 year old. I just turned 60 in June. Still bench 410. Anyway. But I know, I'm very eccentric about my workouts. But that's the problem, is that this secrecy has to do with another whole issue, and that is creating the psychological propaganda and the juggernaut so that people will accept the cost of the next level of militarizing the planet. Going from, and actually Wernher von Braun said, it would go from the Cold War to nations of concern, rogue states, to global terrorism. This was all in the disclosure stuff before 9/11. And then objects in space that could be a threat. You hear all this stuff about asteroids and stuff, to playing the final card, the alien threat, of which there is none. But it'd be great if people could be convinced there is, because they could support then, instead of $1 trillion a year coming into the military system, it could be 5 trillion or 6 trillion or 8 trillion, because the whole world, like the movie Independence Day, would unite. Let's kick alien butt! You see? It's jingoism of the worst kind of propaganda and brainwashing, which 99.9% of people who study the UFO subject have been completely infected with. And that creates its own problem, because ultimately, if you're going to have the public approach this subject in a way that's going to be helpful, it doesn't help to trade humans fighting with each other like murderous monkeys that we have for thousands of years, to starting to fight within our other planetary systems. This is not progress. So progress requires a more universal outlook based on the concepts of cosmic awareness and universal peace. It cannot break down into, oh, well, yes, we're not alone in the universe, but by the way, there's some out here we need to be fighting. Why? Because if we do that, it's the end of the world, period. It really is. You're talking about weapon systems that are scalar electromagnetic systems that go beyond the speed of light. You know what a scalar is? Or longitudinal? Everybody know what this is? I'm going too far, too fast. Well, a quick course in it. The light you see in this room has a wave component, right? And it's 186,000 miles per second is how it travels. A longitudinal scalar is not a wave, but longitudinal in a point, and it's at multiples of the speed of light. You weaponize that, you got something. And the United States has weaponized it. So that's the systems that they're using to track target interstellars as they come through the crossing point of light, step down from other dimensions into this dimension, hit it, boom, down they go. You hear of all these crash retrievals that have happened over the year, that's how they've happened. And I know exactly what the technologies are. I know men who've worked on the systems and operated them, much to their regret. And this then requires some people in governments and the grassroots to say, let's find a better way of making contact. Let's not recreate the mistakes of the last few thousand years, because a new era has opened, the hallmark of which is universal peace, not interstellar war. As great as that is for selling Hollywood movies, it's a very short future. Timeline, boom, stop. Right? Because we're not talking about these. You weaponize this kind of information and technology, it makes a hydrogen bomb look like a tinker toy. So we have got to understand that the existential crisis we have is really in consciousness and our social and spiritual development. But that has to be then applied into our policy. And what's beautiful about this is that even after explaining all this to the Ministry of Defense officials and their Air Force folks and intelligence officials in France, well, the first thing they said was, this is fantastic and terrible, when I explained the nature of secrecy in the United States, United Kingdom, and many other countries. And they said, well, I don't know how much we can do, we'll do what we can. As soon as they faxed me information about what they wanted to do with our team to go and make contact, they got a call. Their ambassador from France to the United States got a rather nasty call, irate, and said, what the hell do you think you're doing? And the ambassador from France to the United States said, well, we're planning to initiate this research project, but also a peaceful rapprochement with these interstellar visitors in a scientific but a visionary way, and we're cooperating with Dr. Greer and his team to do so. And the intelligence folks in the U.S. on the other side said, just stay away from any U.S. assets in any U.S. territory. And the guy said, look, it'll be on French soil, so bug off. And that's how that conversation went. But so there were all manner of delays, which when you see the translation of this letter, you'll see it. The Admiral Morin is apologizing for the delays because there's all this interference going on. You don't step onto this stage without, I mean, you're anyway, you're going to have the whole thing coming at you like a freight train, which we have. But the French stayed true to their purpose, and we eventually did a fantastic CE5, Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind event. Now, was anyone there in France in 2010 or 11? Yeah? Most people don't know that they were there to be trained, but it was actually an event for the Admiral and the Ministry of Defense. So they piggybacked their... Is this disturbing or interesting? I don't know which. This is the way I have to do things. They wanted to be discreet. So they piggybacked their Admiral and their systems on a public CE5. And of course, they were there sitting in plaid shirts and looked like just regular Frenchmen. But the whole area, we're on a 2,200 acre estate, was cordoned off. And you'll see a photograph from a trans-dimensional ET vehicle that blipped in and blipped out very quickly there. But they tracked objects going over the site in excess of 200,000 kilometers an hour. And all kinds of phenomena in the field, weird things, like something you see on Close Encounters of the Third Kind. We had the cars parked in a hayfield and some interstellar trans-dimensional energy form went up and down the cars and turned the lights on and off, did all kinds of strange things. So they were very, very pleased with that. And so then they've sort of gone on from there. But the idea, just the idea that a Ministry of Defense official at this level, very senior admiral, and his team working at the highest levels of the French government would say, we want to pursue interstellar and intergalactic contact for peaceful purposes. This is huge news. This is an enormous development.
Beyond 333. If you just turned over and listened to that, you'd have no idea what we were talking about then. But that was Dr. Stephen Greer in regards to talking about the Disclosure Project.
Yeah, no, I personally...
He's very brave.
Well, quite frankly, I think it's just the only way you can be at this point in time. When you are faced with things that Stephen Greer has been faced with, when you have had experiences like he has had from a meditative standpoint, where you were astral travel, you went out of your body and you met beings that told you this is exactly what's going on, and you can then come down and come up with apps and different protocols that can actually allow you to physically engage these kinds of beings. I mean, you can't refute that, and this is the whole thing. So therefore, even though in public a lot of the so-called people in government will not, they're not disregarding it anymore. They're just not saying anything about it.
Well, it's really interesting because people say to him, when is disclosure going to happen? And as you heard him say, it's already happened. It happened years ago.
Absolutely.
You've got Paul Hellyer, the Minister for Defence for Canada. He physically, verbally came out and said, yes, the Canadian government and the Canadian Defence Department has a lot of contact with UFOs.
I agree to that.
And the French government have come forward now and said exactly the same thing.
Yep.
And Dr. Greer is sitting on piles and piles and piles of documentation from the French government. So the French government, Matt, are coming to Dr. Stephen Greer and saying, we want to be part of the Disclosure Project. And as he said, the two governments of the world that are hanging on to power as much as they can to not let the rest of the world know about disclosure is the United Kingdom and the United States.
And the fact of the matter is, so many different sightings happen in those countries, it's not even funny. And so basically what they're doing is, well, what I said earlier I think goes. I believe that what's happening now is governments know this. They cannot refute the fact that people are having experiences. What they will do is say nothing whatsoever about it. And the thing we used to say, not as a joke even, about the entire UAP or unidentified aerial phenomenon aspect of things is, it's unidentified, and that's the exact line governments will take. Yes, you saw something, but we don't know what it is. And this is what people have to deal with. But this comes down to everything we do in life. We should not be looking for an outside source to verify something that we've experienced. Yes, you want to share experiences, but the fact of the matter is, if you constantly look for someone allegedly better than you or smarter than you, or a person in a higher so-called strata in society than you, to verify your own experiences, you're wasting your time.
That's what I usually say at the end of each show, isn't it? Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.
And that's the whole point of it. You might not have experienced it, someone else might have. If you experience something out there, it basically comes down to that. That is your experience. Embrace it, honor it, recognize it for what it is. You can share it with other people, but the other thing a teacher of mine used to always say, Bible kinds of things, and he was from Asia, do not throw pearls before swine. Therefore, there are certain experiences that you're going to have that you do not share with everyone out there, because they will put negative energy on it. They will try to shut you down, shut it down, and literally you'll regret telling them certain things. So, being that is the case, a lot of times put that on a government. Basically, what it means is the government thinks of you as swine, because they know a lot of information out there, but they're not sharing it with you. Well, in other words, they don't feel we're worthy of that information in some form. I just think it's ridiculous.
Well, Dr. Greer talks about accessing the 0-point energy field.
Yep.
And how extraterrestrial life have already tapped into the 0-point energy field. Now, if the 0-point energy field was released, information was released here as to how to access it, there goes all fuel companies, gone. Electricity companies, gone. Gas, gone. Even natural ways of producing energy naturally using the wind and the ocean, defunct. Totally defunct. So why would people pay their fuel bills when there's technology here to get energy for free. So they're not going to go, yeah, okay, all those experiences are valid. Yes, we're having contact, and yes, it's been going on for a long time, because people would ask, well, what kind of technology have you gotten back? What can you share with us? They're not going to share anything because it's all money.
Yeah, but what I would say, my argument would be, just like they tell all of the people down Geelong Way that used to work for Ford or Holden or something like that, and they were made redundant and they had to find something new, do the exact same thing with the oil companies, do the exact same thing with the gas companies, with the electric companies, all of them. Find something else.
Beyond 3. If you and I got into some kind of government or political arena right now, obviously common sense would say that they're the things that you would put forward as strategies, because we'd be able to say that because we are not involved in kickbacks, we're not involved in political circles, in favours. The entire system only functions if you don't put a spotlight on it.
Well, it's interesting because that's why Donald Trump is doing so well right now.
Yes.
He's not involved in any of the political skullduggery per se. And as he used to say, he was one of the people on the other side paying the politicians for favor, literally. And so, yeah, it's amazing if people actually think that the government is going to hand them stuff on a plate. They're not.
Or save you.
No, they don't care about that. They don't care about saving anything. They care about that entity cares about saving itself and making sure that it can continue in perpetuity.
That's a great way of putting it, Matt, calling the government an entity. Because it is. It's a monster. Yeah. It's a monster that we feed.
We do. And if we don't feed it, it takes.
But that's the thing. We tell ourselves we need the government, but they're actually it's round the other way. The government needs its people. The people don't need the government.
And that's a very valid point as well. It bugs me that, and it's always around taxes and money, it bugs me that they basically are taking your life force, your life energy, and they are putting a tax on it. I really find that abominable. Your life force, your energy is yours to share with who you see fit. It is not for a government to say, all right, you shared something with this person, we want to cut. And as we always used to say, heck, if you really have to do something like that, I'd rather deal with the mob because they have better rates than the government does when it comes to taxing.
And their word is their word. Break your word. Gentleman's handshake.
Yeah.
You can't do that with the government.
No way. No. Impossible. But we want everything. What we're looking for basically is we're looking for this world to move forward. We're looking to evolve. And what is happening is stagnation. What is happening is status quo. What is happening are certain people, 62 people have as much wealth as 40% of the entire Earth's population or something like that.
Yeah,
That's insane. An insane number.
It's insane.
62 people control more wealth than 3 billion? That's ridiculous to say the least. And why is it? I used to say this constantly. When 9/11 happened, the United States, we don't even talk about the conspiracy aspect of it.
We did that last week.
Yeah, but we don't have to even go with that aspect of it. What happened was every country on planet Earth was behind the United States after that event.
In a solidarity way, just the same way that
Yes.
It was. I wouldn't say to the same extent, but the same way it was with Paris recently.
Yeah. And now the United States had a choice. If they had taken the high ground, this world would be so different today.
Absolutely.
But what they did was they took the side of the Sith, for lack of a better term. Mm-hmm. They went the low road. They went the evil road. And all it led to was ISIS, ISIL, Al-Qaeda, all this kind of stuff going on. War, pestilence, starvation. We could have turned it around right there. And they had the opportunity to do it, and what they did was put a bigger yoke around the population's neck. It's just pathetic.
There was an old saying that it sort of stayed in the back of my mind for a long time, and it wasn't until probably a week ago that it made its way to the forefront of my frontal lobe, and I went, I actually get it now. That was the saying of, you don't work to live, you live to work. Or live to work, don't work to live. I didn't actually get what that meant. For a long, long time, I didn't get what that meant until recently when I stopped and I thought, I've made some life choices and I'm putting my quality of life ahead of making money for somebody else.
Yeah.
Okay, and that's what the government is. It's a monster. It's an entity. It's a body that's its only. It will tell you that its job is to make money. It's to make money for itself, so it can do more things for itself. It's not there to serve its people.
Absolutely.
Whereas I've made a choice where I'm going to, from now on, work to live. I will work to live because my quality of life is more important. I'm not going to live for work. And that's all about your perspective on what your priorities are and evolving to a higher consciousness.
It is. And this is the thing. We are looking to evolve, people. We are going to evolve in spite of ourselves. We don't have to worry about that. What we have to do is get out of the way. And we all know in our hearts and in our heads what we're supposed to be doing. You feel so much better when you're helping people. You feel so much better when you are laughing and loving with people. You feel so much better than just getting up and going into some job where you must follow policies and procedures, and it's regimented and it's compartmentalized, and it drains your spiritual energy and it drains your physical energy to the point where you go home at the end of the day and you're just exhausted. It's annoying. When you get up and you're doing something that you truly love, that you're passionate about, that you feel you're contributing to society with, life is a joy.
That's the thing, Matt. When people wake up on a Monday morning and they have that sense of dread, or even some people go to bed on a Sunday night, and before they fall asleep, they're laying there thinking about what horrible things do I have to walk into tomorrow morning on Monday. That is not the life you're meant to live. It is not.
Yeah, and a really good thing in Australia here is it's a really good thing to have to go through if you've worked in the corporate world or anything like that. The time comes where the company is culling, moving forward, they believe, and they get rid of a lot of people. And people have a choice. And the choice is they can take a package and leave and try to find something else to do, or they're going to try to hide behind their cubicle and hopefully they'll be passed over and they can keep their job. I got to see something like this firsthand, and it was amazing to me how people would complain on a daily basis about what was going on in their jobs. They couldn't stand the managers. They couldn't stand the 5 different levels of management because a lot of companies are very tall.
I know where you're going with this. Keep going.
And they had a choice they could have made. They could have said, okay, well, they're going to give me this amount of money to leave, and I then can be in control of my own destiny, and I can find something to do that I really want to do.
Absolutely.
And how many of them actually do it?
None. Oh, actually, no, I would say none. I'd say there'd be a very small handful.
I can tell you exactly what happened in an instance I was in. This was offered to 100 people. 3 people out of 100.
Wow.
Decided to say, that's it for me, I'll move on.
And that's the universe going, hello, here's a new opportunity.
Exactly. And a lot of people just let it go by. They just let it pass by them. And it's just a shame that more people can't have, I don't know, the guts to just say, well, look, I'm going to try something different because if I stay here, I'm killing my soul.
And can I tell you, Matt, a lot of people would be listening to this conversation right now and thinking to themselves, that's all very well and good, Matt and Clint, but you know what? We've got bills to pay.
Absolutely.
But guess what? Everybody's got bills to pay.
That's right.
And the minute you make a decision to change the path of your life, the universe will be right behind you, helping you along the way.
Yes, it will. If you're making $40,000 a year, you have to pay an electric bill right now. But the fact of the matter is, if you're making $40 million a year, you have to pay an electric bill right now. Everybody has to pay it. It's all about degrees.
Who's making $40 million a year?
Oh, somebody.
You got those kind of friends?
Oh, there are people out there that are making a whole lot of money. All right, let's say it this way, $1,000 an hour lawyers. They have an electric bill as well. So look, this is just the way it is. You given opportunities every once in a while, the universe will put you in a situation where you can say, whoa. And if you do the right thing, or if you step back and follow the heart and the head properly, you'll be able to move on. And maybe you may think it's dangerous. It may scare you.
That's good. That's good.
That's the good stuff.
That's the good stuff. If it's scary and it's dangerous, do it.
Mm-hmm. Because ultimately, it's going to make you so much stronger, and you're going to evolve so much quicker by doing that than just constantly settling back in, comfortable and everything like that. You have to take risk.
Stormy seas make the best sailors.
Absolutely. No risk, no reward whatsoever. At all.
You got anything else this week, Matt?
Oh, no. I'm just happy that I was able to finally see that movie. I now have to go see a few others. There is a new Star Trek movie coming out as well I need to see, and one of my favorites, or at least the first one was a favorite, Independence Day. Mm-hmm. The second one of that is coming out as well, and I'm really looking forward to that. I'm hoping they do I'm hoping they do that justice, because I thoroughly enjoyed the first one.
Unfortunately, Will Smith is been written out of this sequel.
Oh well. There's a reason. He didn't want to be in it. So if that's the way you are, it could be a conflict, scheduling conflict, you never know. But if you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it. Choice. It's all about choice.
It all comes down to choice. And
absolutely.
That's it for this week, Matt?
Yep, absolutely. Guys, take care out there. As I said a lot of times this year already, Clint and I have a lot of interviews we're doing, and we have to edit them up and have a lot of things done so we can present this to you properly. We have to present the information to you in a way that it gets across, for lack of a better term, it really gets into your heart and into your heads. So we're dealing with people that are going to give you information that is going to do just that. It's going to start to change the way you think and move and do things on this planet. So hang in there with us. We love presenting it to you. We will be back again next week with another edition of Beyond 3D.
Take care, everybody. Just because you haven't experienced it doesn't mean it doesn't exist.